We've tons of questions. We've done a few of these live streams, and this has been one of the most popular ones in terms of streams of questions coming in. And I suppose people are interested. It's that time of year when people who don't generally use the motorway network or the rail network are thinking about breaks away. We just had Paddy's Day, we have the Easter break coming up soon, then a May bank holiday. We're kind of in bank holiday season, so there's plenty of questions that are recurring to people. So we'll start first of all with something that happened today, and it's something that happens unfortunately every couple of months. We see a story like this, and a truck hit the bridge. It all seems to be the bridge at Bath Avenue in Dublin 4. I don't know what it is about that bridge, but what can you tell us about what happened today?
Yeah, it was a truck, low loader, with some machinery on the back, and quite simply the driver just hit the bridge, managed to free himself and drove off without waiting, and that's something that we'll address elsewhere. There's CCTV, thankfully. And what has to happen in those situations is, even though in the vast majority of situations, if a vehicle hits a bridge, the bridges are strong, it won't be an issue, but we do have to check it before we can get the trains over it again. So we get the bridge crew out as quickly as we can. I think the line was stopped for about 20 minutes this morning, but it's between Grand Canal Dock and Lansdowne Road. It's a busy morning peak and affects thousands of people.
Right, and what's the situation if, obviously not that specific one, but in cases where a truck hits a road, and it's happened a couple of times. I noticed, I think this was in late 2013, you were tweeting about the driver. We have your reg and the company you drive for, talk soon, lots to discuss, was the tweet from Irish Well. It sounds like it's something that kind of gets your goat.
Well, it does, because, you know, it is basic. I mean, it is basic as, you know, a car driver knowing that you have to indicate when you're turning onto another road. The truck driver has to know their load heights, and they also have to know the heights of bridges on the route that they're taking. And even if they don't know that second bit, there is signage in front of all of these bridges saying this is the clearance. So therefore, if you know part one, you should know that part two is not going to end happily if you decide to go down that road.
Right, so statistically we probably have quite a few truck drivers watching, so if you want any personal threats you want to give out, let us know. But
we know where you live.
That's definitely noted. On to something else that people have been talking about in the last couple of days. We had that vandalism at the train station in Bayside. And again, that's my neck of the woods, and I know that's happened at that train station a couple of times. It happened at Kilbarraco Junction as well, going back the last couple of years. I suppose in Bayside in particular, it can be a quite isolated station at night. After rush hour, it's a bit of a in housing estate, but it's a bit away. What happens there in terms of investigation and following that up? It just gets handed over to the Gardaí. And
well, you know, you work with the Gardaí. Obviously, again, CCTV covers that area. Obviously, the investigations, because it wasn't just the Dart station. I think the nearby shopping centre as well was vandalised. It is, as you say, kind of in that area. We've had a few issues, and we've been setting up a community forum with the Gardaí and with kind of local residents associations to try to address some of these. People who travel on the News Line now, for example, will know Broome Bridge was very much a black spot for antisocial behaviour, for vandalism, and the community there were very proactive, and we've been working with them. We've actually seen the number of incidents go down by about half there. Still, you know, we do have too many problems there, but it just shows that by getting the various groups together, we can get some progress. But it's going to need, from our side, additional security resources in a time when we're, you know, financially tight, but it has to be done, and obviously then working with the Gardaí to ensure there's rapid response when things happen.
Is it something that's increased since you have fewer manned stations in the evening since the machines came in, or is there anything to
not particularly? I mean, seasonally certainly we will have issues. You know, summer will be busier from that point of view. Again, we work with the Gardaí ahead of things like, you know, when you get the very good weather during the summer, the Portmarnock Beach weekends, that type of thing, in terms of ensuring that we work with them. People will remember we close certain stations for access at Garda request when you've got very large groups going out to Holt or Portmarnock for a short time. So there's very close liaison there, but certainly if you like, there's a new initiative there in that kind of Kilbarraco Junction Bayside area, because it is an area where we're having too many problems.
Yep, okay. Moving on to another issue. These are just general questions people have been asking about With this new intercity train plan to link Dublin Airport with the likes of Cork, Galway and Belfast, something your CEO David Franks was talking about in a newspaper interview at the start of the year. I believe it still has to get an okay from the government and all that sort of thing. So what's the status with that at the moment?
Well, it's the National Transport Authority at the moment are assessing all of the various options to serve Dublin Airport and to serve Swords, if you like. It's the North Dublin Transport Study. So it's been considered actually in conjunction with a light rail option that would serve Swords heading in through and coming out from Cabra, going underground Glasnevin and out that corridor to Swords. So we certainly feel that in terms of getting a fast link to the city centre, in terms of giving the kind of capacity that you need when you're coming off airplanes with luggage, and in terms of the cost of building this and building it without impacting negatively on existing infrastructure, you're talking about in the region of 250 million euro, which is a lot of money but relatively modest in infrastructure terms, and you're building it in greenfields directly under the flight path. So you would then have airport to city centre darts taking 20 minutes to get into the city centre and connecting to the national network. And longer term, when the Dart Underground is developed, you then have airport through Docklands, Pearse and Stevens Green, Christchurch, Houston, linking to the national network. So it would give benefit in the shorter term and give a lot of longer term strategic options as well for the development of the rail network.
And if all Irish Rail's recommendations are taken on board, what's the fastest we can imagine this happening?
4 years, if it was approved, funding was approved, and with the planning process, there's an accelerated planning process for infrastructure projects. But with all that going smoothly, we'll be talking about a 4-year period from approval to trains running.
Okay, great stuff. Another big issue people have been talking about. It might seem like a minor thing, but it's a big thing if you're caught short, and that's the closure of toilets at train stations. Something like 10 or 15 toilet facilities being closed over the last year or so, I think it is.
Yeah.
What's the rationale for that?
Well, we looked at it. I suppose there's a project that's covering not just toilets, it's power supply to stations where there's a lot of costs, and looking at things like replacing heating systems so they're more energy efficient. In terms of toilets, where we've got a male and female toilet in some stations, we've just amalgamated them, so it's a unisex toilet now. And in some areas though, when stations are unmanned, we will close them because we're getting costs from things like vandalism and antisocial behaviour. All of our trains, with the exception of the Dart, do have toilet facilities on board, and generally people aren't waiting that long at stations for their next train. So it's a very small number of instances where there simply isn't a facility available outside commuter stations where we don't have them anyway because of the frequency of services. But
and these tend to be kind of outer commuter stations?
Some, there's like the New Bridge or whatever, and then in some other smaller stations where you have very, very lightly used stations, like for example Rosslare Strand, not the ferry terminal as was misreported elsewhere. The ferry terminal obviously is a very important point of access for tourists, but Rosslare Strand, very small station, very lightly used, and we do have issues with vandalism and antisocial behaviour, so we have closed the facilities there. Okay.
Now, faults on the rail system. This is something that got a good bit of attention. At the end of last year, there was a series of faults on the north side of Dublin, and there was delays. It all seemed to be rush hour for some reason throughout a couple of weeks. So that's one issue, and then another signal fault this morning. A reader just got in contact to say there was people left waiting for an hour on a crowded train at Clonsilla because of a fault at Glasnevin. So if you just talk us through, I mean, this would seem to be one thing that goes wrong in the system, and it can cause chaos and cause delays for thousands of vehicles.
But signalling is the eyes and ears of the railway system. It's what allows trains to run safely. It basically says the next section of this rail network is clear, therefore this train can proceed into it. So if your signalling system has a fault, it fails safe, everything goes to red. But basically the controller then doesn't have that oversight of exact positioning of the train. So you try to rectify it as quickly as you can. If you can't, then we do put in certain restricted working, which again will reduce the number of trains that come through. So if your signalling isn't working, it is going to cause disruption. It was a bad one this morning at Glasnevin, affected about 3 points in total, which affected. So we didn't ordinarily, if we had a fault there, we'd be able to bring trains into either Docklands or Connolly. This morning we were able to bring them into neither, and it caused a lot of disruption. Obviously, we apologise to people for that, and indeed some of them then got caught by the truck in the bridge later on as they headed south side. In terms of that recurring fault late last year, that was, and I'm trying to remember the exact details of it now, but it was this recurring software fault that literally hit at the same time every time it happened. It was something like 17:37 in the evening, so right at the heart of peak. That particular issue has been rectified. We are also at the moment doing work to upgrade the signalling on various parts of the network. We did it out around the Hopes Junction area there last year. We're going to be working through this year and next on the city centre area as well. The main purpose of that is to allow more trains to run, because at the moment we can only run 12 trains each way per hour through that heart of that city centre, that Connolly to Grand Canal dock area. This would allow us to build that up to 20 each way, so you can grow the number of trains on all of the routes. But as well as the benefit of it being more trains, it's a newer system, so there'll be less faults.
Okay, we've got a few questions from readers about that in a second. I'll get to the reader questions as quick as I can. So this is from Barry O'Shea. So his question is, who deems stations to be within the Dublin commuter zone? Kilcool, for instance, is a further distance from Kilcock from Connolly Station with a vast fare difference. How do we go about changing it so that there's a fair service for all passengers? He pays, he says, $1,750 a year for an annual rail ticket. So obviously there'll be huge differences between people travelling, from different stations, and it might be, €500 perhaps.
Right.
In some circumstances.
The short answer is the National Transport Authority that decide on fares and fare structures. One thing they have been doing, and indeed before they took responsibility, that we've been doing as well for a few years, is to try to narrow those gaps. So it is an issue in some areas. As it happens, Kilcock's not a good example, because the actual annual ticket from Kilcock is 1,640, and from Maynooth it's 1,420, which is the next station in. So per kilometre you're actually paying less from Kilcock in that particular instance, which shows actually how that has worked over years in terms of trying to bridge those gaps. The fact of the matter is, if you bring, however, a station into another structure, there's going to be lost revenue-wise to us, and we have funding issues, and that has to be made up from somewhere.
It must be very frustrating for people who live just over the line.
Sure, and I mean it is the case. Internationally, you've got urban fare structures and you have national fare structures, so it's not something that uniquely happens in Ireland. There are, if you like, kind of great, because when you have density of use, as you do in a commuter area, you're spreading those operating costs amongst more customers. So when you go out into a national network, it's obviously less per customer, and that's why you have these different structures internationally. There's the NTA who decide on it, and they obviously, we put in our fares application annually. They will decide not only on what we apply, but they have indeed in some instances changed the fare structures primarily within the commuter zone, but it is also within their gift to change the boundaries as well.
Okay, question from TheJournal.ie's Paul Hosford, who's sitting over there behind us. Why on St. Patrick's Day, the busiest tourist day of the year, does public transport run a Sunday service?
Well, basically the patterns of travel are completely different on a public holiday. If we were running a weekday service with lots of trains at 6, 7, 8 in the morning on the commuter network, there'd be nobody on them. But actually what we did was, it wasn't just a basic Sunday service. We operated 5 darts from the north side, 5 from the south side, additional to a Sunday service before the parade, a similar number afterwards, extra trains from Drogheda and Maynooth. So if you look at the dart, during the times that people were travelling into and home from the parade, we actually had more frequent service than we would on a normal weekday. So it wasn't just a case of the flat Sunday service, it was with the extra trains at the right times.
Okay. Question from Barry Finnegan, a reader. Is there any chance the Navan rail line project could be resurrected? Now, this was part of the Transport 21 plan, I think, back in 2005.
It was, and we got quite away with the planning there, but a lot of those projects were simply put on ice when the country's economic crisis hit. It's not something that's being actively talked about being revived at the moment. There's a very limited funding in terms of capital investment. Our priority right now is in terms of maintaining and improving the existing network. That's why we're doing work on the Cork line, for example, to try to improve speeds there. The type of projects that are being talked about for the future are things like the Airport Dart, the Phoenix Park Tunnel, Dart Underground. Navan, at the moment, isn't on the agenda, I'm afraid.
Okay. Question from the tech teams, Stephen McBride, in fact, who you were talking to earlier on. Why are they still running 4-carriage darts at rush hour? They say they're continuously monitoring the situation, but this doesn't seem to be true. I've been on so many darts, and they've been dangerously overcrowded because of this policy, and nothing seems to be changing. 4 carriage darts at rush hours.
Yeah, we have a mix of 4, 6 and 8. We do look at where the actual numbers are, the times people are travelling on. Dart travel and commuter travel and their equivalents everywhere around the world involve full loading, which involves heavy levels of standing at peak times. I hate to kind of reiterate or whatever, we do have a funding problem at the moment. But against that, since we made the original changes, since we reduced the capacities, we've increased 20 trains in total in size during the morning and evening peaks by looking at the loadings, how they've been developing. Thankfully, we're getting growth again, and we have the scope as that happens to increase either individual trains or generally increase capacity. One thing we are looking at doing, and we'll be looking at for early next year, is trying to increase the frequency of darts again, to move from, we have a core service of every 15 minutes with some additional services at peak, but to try to increase those. And we're looking at training up drivers internally as well, so we have the resources to do that. So the dart is on a growth path again, thankfully, and we will respond to that and make sure that at all times the capacity is there, but it will always involve standing.
And do you need to train up drivers from elsewhere in the network, or how will that work?
No, it's anybody internally can apply. We do recruit internally in the first instance. So there's quite a lot.
People who are already drivers or working elsewhere in the company.
You can, or if you're working in other parts of the company, if you're working at stations or whatever, there's quite a lot of aptitude tests, whatever. It's a solitary job. It's an interesting job. It's not for everybody, and quite a lot of people follow that hurdle as it happens. But that training is happening.
Okay, great stuff. From reader Neil Loughlin, can you ask why on the busiest trains the names above the seat for pre-booked tickets conveniently don't work? I've noticed it happening at least 5 times, and those times have been on the busiest trains, i.e. Friday evening, Dublin to Cork, Dublin to Galway. I was talking to the girl sitting next to me last Friday, and she even said it's too much of a coincidence that this always seems to happen on the booked out trains. So she's saying essentially that she turns up, she might have her pre-booked ticket, you expect your name to appear above the seat, but the displays aren't working.
Well, it's certainly chaos. Not conveniently, it's inconveniently for us and for more importantly for customers.
Is it on the busiest trains though?
It's not that it would happen there. It does happen too much. It does happen too much that they're not operational when people board. We are actually changing the technological systems behind that so that it'll be more reliable, and I hope that your reader will see that. We'll see a real improvement in that in the next few weeks, because it is one of the issues that we get, that customers tell us about the most, and when we have it working to correct. It's as I say, the technological backup, and you're asking the wrong person in terms of the IT side of that. But we are changing the way that it's done, so as people, when they board the train, when the doors open, that information will be up on the screen.
Okay, now I've got a few questions to get to. A lot of people have been getting in touch about the situation with the Phoenix Park tunnel. Now you touched on that earlier on. This is to do with the signal upgrade for the city. So at the moment it's used for freight trains.
Primarily freight trains. We'd run extra trains for when there's, for example, concerts or GA matches on, and right now we don't use it day to day for commuter services because Connolly is at capacity, because we can't get any more trains through there. But when that resignaling is done, back end of 2016, early 2017, and again this is down to NTA funding, but it looks quite likely, we will be operating some services from the Kildare line, not serving Houston, coming around through the Phoenix Park tunnel, and then serving Drumcondra, Connolly, Tara Street, Pearse and Grand Canal Dock. So the real benefit there is in terms of people coming in on that Kildare southwestern corridor, getting them around to the south of Dublin City, because right now their connections aren't very convenient. We also want to maintain, of course, the service for people coming in to Houston who are along those Lewis and bus connections, and because we built up a good market there as well. So we don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul in this instance, but we will have a good range of services for both customer groups, meaning overall an increase in the number of trains coming in from Kildare.
And this could be happening late this year?
It'll be late 16, early 17.
Okay. From Jim Jetson, possibly not his real name, and we should have hovering trains at this stage if you did it this way. The timetable for the Maynooth commuter line is a joke, so there you go. What's the point in having trains leaving Maynooth which arrive in town at 9:45, 9:56 and 10:14, why not take 2 of those trains and have them run at peak rush hour time? So essentially it means so you can have a train arriving into the middle of Dublin before 9 a.m.
Sure, and we have trains every 10 minutes on the Maynooth line. Now, if you're from Maynooth, it's probably roughly about every 15. But if you add then the M3 Parkway trains that join the Maynooth line at Clonsilla, it's easily every 10 minutes, which is a more frequent service than the Dart, in fact. In terms of those trains as they arrive back in, think of the outward leg that they're doing. They're bringing students from along the line out to Maynooth College. So, rather than running a train back in empty and not getting any revenue, we will put that in service, which is why you have that little cluster of services around that time. Some people do start work at 10 o'clock, particularly in the retail sector, so there is a demand there as well for it, but the primary purpose of those trains is actually in the opposite direction just before.
Right, and will the whole Phoenix Park Tunnel situation help that?
No, it's separate. It's on the Kildare side rather than the Maynooth line.
Beg your pardon. Question from TheJournal.ie's political correspondent Hugh O'Connell, who's also sitting over there. Hugh spends a lot of his time travelling up and down to Ardeshina and party conferences, and his problems, as many readers did too, with the Wi-Fi, tends to drop out a line. Drop out a lot when you're outside of urban areas. Is there anything being done to
we in terms of, we've got our own kit in terms of upgrading that on board, and that is being rolled out at the moment. Also, we have to work with mobile phone providers, because our Wi-Fi basically is an aggregation of the various signals, and it will choose the best signal at any particular point. And it's not just here. I was reading about it in Britain just a few weeks ago as well, that a lot of the mobile phone providers actually haven't worked deliberately, if you like, to cover the rail networks. So we are liaising with them, pointing out there is coverage area here, there's demand for the services, and we're also looking at then, are there other things that we can do, such as, for example, store content on the trains, which would be a service for customers, and then free up more of the bandwidth for people who are just on casually.
Okay, great stuff. And there's some questions that have been coming into us as we've been chatting here. And just to let you know, it's a journal live stream, so we've had Barry Kenny here. He's only with us for a few more minutes, but Sean O'Neill of the National Roads Authority will be coming up afterwards if you have any questions. News at TheJournal.ie, or find us on Twitter and fire them to us there. So just a few final questions for Barry. Barry, I'm not sure what you can do with this really. Does Irish Rail understand what the word punctual means? They keep using it, but I don't think they know what it means.
We do know what it means. One thing I'll say is that, and people will see the posters in the stations about punctuality sticks, they're based on the NTA contract. So the NTA say, right, here are the minimum performance standards that we require from you. So when you see those posters in the stations, punctuality is the timekeeping. Those stats are within 10 minutes for intercity services, etc., and within 5 minutes for Dart. Reliability is if the train ran at all or not. That's the one that tends to be 99%, 100%. So that is basically that the train ran. Punctuality is, let's say, those measures that the NTA set. Okay,
this is from Sean O'Kelly via email. Can you foresee more staff being recruited to work in actual stations? I'm asking this because I'm a person with a physical disability, and the service for people like myself is getting worse.
What we could see actually more so is more people to work on the trains, because if you take it that you're at a station maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe a little longer at some of the intercity stations, but you're actually on the train generally for much longer. So that's where the majority of the customer service requirement is. But also it means that if you need assistance in boarding or alighting from the trains, the train would have somebody on board. So that's our focus, is in terms of developing and where we're resourcing will be more so on the trains rather than the stations. If we're going to grow in any area, that's where it would be.
Okay, and finally from Dermot O'Gara via email, how come some train drivers and station staff are pretty good at explaining why delays are taking place, others just don't bother their backsides? We have had a bit of feedback, some people saying that if the train goes dead, sometimes there is a voice there, people finding out what goes on pretty quickly. Other times they're left there stranded, so to speak, for which is probably the worst aspect of being in that kind of situation, not really knowing what's happening.
Yeah, well, people are generally quite understanding of a delay situation if it's explained to them, and I think the vast majority of our staff are very good at that. It is something that we want it to be. Everybody is very good at it, and customer service standards are always being developed. We're always working with the various teams around the network. So the other part of it is then to support the staff, make sure those PA systems are always working and working well as well.
Yeah, we've had kind of mixed views on your use of Twitter. A lot of people are quite appreciative of it. Some others are saying that they generally don't hear something from you until there's kind of a clamour. say a train has been stuck at a station for 20 minutes and people are tweeting at Irish Rail, they eventually hear back. I suppose, what's your attitude been towards social media? How have you found it helps you communicating, and is that you on the end of Twitter when we see the tweets?
It's part of the people involved certainly work for me, whatever. Yeah. I do a little bit of it myself as well from time to time. It's very good. It's very good in terms of getting that concise information out to customers. You take it, you're a customer and you're on a train and it stops between two stations and you're there about 3 minutes, whatever. We'll start getting it then. That wouldn't necessarily be a time when we would start putting, because Twitter is a broadcast medium, and it's something you're sending out to people to say, well, look, there's an issue here which may require you to change your travel plans. That type of thing. I think overall, obviously, it's a means. Take this morning, you'll see a lot of people very annoyed on the Maynooth line, and obviously it's an opportunity to let us know about that. Also, it helped us in able to be report through our control. Can we ensure that announcements are being made on all of the trains? So even if you're not getting a direct response, and at a time of high volume like this morning, every individual message isn't going to get a direct response. We put out the broadcast messages for everybody, but it is being monitored during constantly 7:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening, and that is something that's fed back in, be it to train maintenance, be it to our central traffic control who look at the whole network and pass a message on to driver and staff. So it's really, really good two-way information for us, and I think generally it has been well received, and it's an add-on. It's not the only means of communication. Obviously it is important that it is part of a suite that involves staff at stations, staff and trains as well. Yeah, and what would your advice for passengers, I suppose, be? Because you probably get a lot of slightly vague tweets saying, I'm on a train stuck in Kildare. You might get them in and go, a couple of things, whatever, whatever. What time is this train going to get to Dublin? Well, what train is it? Is an important bit of information. If there are issues on a particular train, look out for the carriage ID on the train. It's a 5-digit number, generally 4 or 5-digit number. Generally the carriage ends, and that helps us to report information to maintenance very, very quickly. And obviously, hopefully, people have occasion to tweet us as well to tell us if their journey is good and the positives around it. Okay, there's some advice for you. Great. Barry Kenny, thanks for joining us this afternoon. We'll let you go.